You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Welcome into another Three Mall Pod. No John today, but in his place, we have a special guest for all of you as we're joined by ESPN NFL Draft Insider and analyst Matt Miller. Before we dive in, as always, we want to thank our friends at 360 Vodka and Holiday Distillery for their support. Make sure you stock up on some 360 Vodka or Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon as you get ready for your Sugar Bowl watch party or New Year's Eve celebrations. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. It's a great time to have you on as K-State has several guys in decision-making mode right now regarding their NFL future, and we wanted to get your thoughts on some of K-State's potential pros as well as the talent K-State might be up against in Bama in the Sugar Bowl. But first, maybe you tweeted in early June, Matt, and I wanted to quote this because you look pretty smart with this, that you tweeted, and I quote, "Looking at the Kansas State 2023 draft prospects, they might be a handful in the Big 12 this year," end quote. And you certainly proved to be correct as the Cats are Big 12 champs. So maybe let's just start
there.
Yeah, well, we got lucky too. It was a bit of a roller coaster ride of a season. We all had K-State making the Big 12 championship, but after that Tulane loss, I don't know if any of us felt the same there. So we got fortunate as well. But maybe to start off at a high level, looking at that, did any of the prospects for K-State draft prospects you were looking at before the season help improve their stock this year? Or did they do kind of what you expected?
I think honestly kind of what I expected. And that might be a case of maybe I overrated guys a little bit headed into the season. Players like Felix at defensive end or Deuce Vaughn at running back who are, were hugely impactful this year. I think, could probably say team MVPs on their respective sides of the ball. So I would say that this is a well-coached team. That was one of the reasons I was really optimistic about it. And I think in the Big 12, as we saw this year, sometimes that matters more than how many 4 or 5 stars you have. It's like, how well coached are you? Are you going to limit mistakes? This is an offense that doesn't really turn the ball over a lot. And it to me felt like they were set up to, be able to rush the quarterback. They were able to, set the edge in this, kind of outside run game that you see a lot of in the Big 12. So I think, again, I never would have, thought they were going to be Big 12 champs. I thought they were going to be, a team that was really tough this year. So they definitely outplayed my expectations as well. But there's definitely a handful of players that are draft eligible that made a big difference this year.
What do you make of Felix and Uzomah? I think before the season you thought he was maybe a top 5, top 6 defensive end. What do you make of the way he played this year? I know he's Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, 8.5 sacks. He's played banged up much of the year as well. But What do you look at his draft outlook and his future and maybe what decision he should make versus coming back or going pro?
Yeah, I will say it's become a deep defensive end class. So I think where maybe over the summer, a lot of people thought this could be a late first-round player. Probably now it's more like second round, maybe even early third, just because of the depth at defensive end has pushed him down as other guys have come up. And as you mentioned, playing banged up this year, you love that. As a college football fan, sometimes it can affect the guy's stock. We'll see when we get into true draft season, how the medicals shake out. Once I have folks like myself, we have more time to actually watch every snap a player plays, that definitely impacts grades as well. But I do think, he's a starting defensive end candidate in the NFL. I'm excited to see if he does come out, what his testing measurables look like, because for defensive ends, so much that matters so much, okay, you had production in college, the height, length, speed, weight, those are all there. But, what does the agility look like? It's hugely important. If I could only have one number for defensive end, I would want another 3-cone time to show that surety of quickness, body control, balance, things like that really matter. So all that said, there are times I'm asked to consult with players and I try to do a deep dive into if they should come out, if they should not. That whole game has changed because of NIL, where you might be able to go back to a Kansas State for another year and make a considerable amount of money, not as much as you could as a rookie in the NFL, but if you can make a considerable amount in a final season at K-State and better your draft stock, that's a great situation for a player that didn't exist a couple of years ago. So I would say right now, if I was asked to, consult and give a grade, it would be round 2 with the, the potential to rise a little and maybe to drop a little. But he's certainly someone I think we'll see start in the NFL for a long time.
No, it's tougher because they all play different positions, but they kind of got the big 3 there between Deuce, Felix, and Cooper Beebe. In your mind, who's probably the most attractive NFL prospect between the three? Is it Felix?
I think it is Felix. And number one, it's like the position he plays, there's a premium. I think you could argue that defensive end is the second most important position in football right now. I mean, maybe it's left tackle, maybe it's corner. It's probably defensive end for most teams. If you're building, that's where you want to start, quarterback and then defensive end. I also think, the track record of production is there. The athleticism on tape looks to be really good. So he definitely checks a lot of boxes. But, Deuce is fantastic. There's going to be a lot of questions about size when it comes to him. And does that size limit him? Is he going to be a 3-down player, or is he just a 3rd-down player? Is he just a scat back? And then with Cooper Beebe, I mean, what phenomenal year he had. And I think, probably you asked originally if anyone helped himself. I would say he probably helped himself the most of any K-State player this year in terms of boosting their draft stock.
Is it kind of with Beebe, is it the fact that he's played tackle? Now he's also played guard. He can probably be a center if he wanted to in the NFL, that versatility?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Like you guys, you're close to the Kansas City Chiefs, and we've seen someone, like Andrew Wiley have so much value because he can do a little bit of everything, and I think when you're not a starter, that's great because, it's not Madden, unfortunately, where you can carry 2 or 3 of every position. Like you kind of need a guy that can do multiple things on the offensive line in the pros. And so for Cooper Beebe, that adds value. And it's similar to where like with Deuce Vaughn, where, okay, if you're not a number 1 running back, if you're not a Derrick Henry or Jonathan Taylor, can you play special teams? And, we see that with the Chiefs with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Okay, well, you're not a special teams contributor. So how do you fit in when we're building out a roster? So I think for those players, both, that versatility is huge because when you have, Cooper who can play, like you said, 2, probably 3 positions, I mean, that's a gold mine for a general manager to say, okay, well, we only have to pay 1 guy and he could be a backup at 2 spots. And we feel really comfortable with that. That's definitely, it doesn't take you from being a day 3 pick to a day 2 pick, but it's something that will make you more valuable, as a 4th round pick. It makes you more valuable when you start to build out a roster and figure out, all right, we only have so much money to go around. And now we can have, a young player not making a ton who can be a core backup. I think that's really important.
It really reminds me of actually another former K-State offensive lineman and Cody Whitehair, now with the Chicago Bears, just with all his versatility. Whitehair played tackle, guard, and a little bit of center at Kansas State. But where would you have Beebe slotted in the draft right now, Matt? Is he a day 2 or day 3 pick in all likelihood?
Yeah, for me, it would probably be an early day 3 pick. So you're thinking like early round 4. Again, some of it's going to depend on what we see, if everything got messed up on the classes. So if he's Senior Bowl eligible, if he has graduated, that's one of the keys, or Shrine Bowl eligible. And then what would happen at the NFL Combine? I think the tape is probably early day 3, but the versatility could be huge. I personally have ranked him at guard. I think that was a fantastic move for him to get inside and show at his size, his agility is really, really attractive. And what he's able to do in the run game, getting to the second level. So I would think, if you're finding him around 4, for an offensive guard, that's still a pretty high pick. We don't see a lot of guards go early in the draft. And to me, that signals a player that you think could be a starter.
We talked about Deuce. DY brought him up, and you talked about him some. That right now, that sounds like a decision he's back and forth on whether he returns to college, goes pro, and as you mentioned, NIL, huge factor as well in all of this. But what do you put Deuce's draft prospects at? Is he a day 3 guy? Is he his size isn't going to change, which I assume is always going to be the biggest knock on him. So, do you think he goes pro in terms of your mind? Should he go pro? And do you think he's like a 5th, 6th round type guy?
So what I've always told, families of running backs or agents that talk to me, things like that, is you shouldn't take free carries at running back when you don't have to. And so normally you would tell a guy, if you are going to get drafted, you should probably go, right? Especially if you're going to be drafted in the first 3 or 4 rounds. I have Deuce right now as like a mid-day 3 pick, so round 5, round 6. You mentioned it, Cole, perfectly. He's not going to get bigger. He's not going to get taller, right? He's probably done growing at this point. So that is going to be the biggest knock, it's just – we don't see a lot of running backs at 5'6", and we'll see if he's actually 5'6" once he gets officially measured or not. It's rare, but I do think what makes Deuce such an interesting conversation point is he has all the skills to play on Sunday. I mean, you look at what Jerick McKinnon is doing. You look at guys who've had a lot of success. I mean, Darren Sproles, another very famous shorter running back who had a ton of success in the NFL. So there's definitely you can look and say, okay, there's comparables of someone can have success. He's great in the open field. He's a really good receiver. Obviously incredibly productive. You do worry about, is the size going to limit his usage to where if he's only a third down back, if he's, can he hold up and pass pro at his size, because you have to be able to. So there are a lot of questions that his size brings to the table. I think, again, with NIL, I'm not sure what K-State's doing in terms of payouts for players, but I would think that he would be probably close to making a rookie salary and, becoming a legend in Manhattan, Kansas, and also having the opportunity to maybe boost his stock a little bit. I remember when Nick Chubb went back to Georgia, we all thought he was crazy. It was like, what? You're going to be a third-round pick. Why would you go get hit in the SEC for free? And he helped himself tremendously. And he also improved his game. He became a better receiver, a better blocker, and it's helped him become one of the best running backs in the NFL. So sometimes it's not just about the money either. It's about, can I become a better player in college without the pressure of the NFL?
Another discussion point is the opt-outs, or in this game, the Sugar Bowl, the lack thereof at this point, right? Kansas State doesn't have any either. Just with the opponent being Alabama and the opportunity in front of them, how much can some of these guys for Kansas State actually elevate their stock just based on this one game?
Yeah, there are split decisions or opinions, around the NFL scouting community of, does it help you, a marquee matchup? I actually think it does. And the reason being is because you might be a guy that, is a starter at K-State, but we haven't talked about a lot. It might be if Julius Brents picks off Bryce Young 3 times, it's going to help, right? And it's going to help because you're going to, hey, wait, maybe this guy wasn't on our radar, and now we're doing a deeper dive and looking at him more closely. So I think it can help players that are maybe lower rated or unrated guys at this point to get on the radar a little bit and to build some momentum. So I think that can definitely help. Like you said, we're not expecting opt-outs. Bryce Young's going to play. Will Anderson's going to play. This is a very different Alabama team. If you have viewers that are Big 12 only, this is not last year's Alabama team. At wide receiver, they don't have one player that is draftable right now. Their offensive line is the worst it's been in a long time. The run game is good, but it's a different run game. It's not a power run game. Jamar Gibbs is a very good receiver out of the backfield. He's very fast. So this is a really different Alabama team that, obviously, they lost 2 games this year. They're not the dominant force that they were even a year ago or certainly 2 years ago.
And what do you make of Bryce Young and Will Anderson actually deciding to play in this game? There's probably great financial risk in doing so, although it sounds like Alabama might be mitigating that somewhat.
Yeah, definitely. There's insurance policies. There's ways around it. I go back to watching Jalen Smith at Notre Dame take a hit out of bounds, and I almost cried watching it because he was my number 1 rated player in the draft at that point. And obviously he fell to the second round. It's impacted his NFL career quite a bit. But I think with Bryce and Will, there's a genuine love and respect for Coach Nick Saban. There's a genuine love for the University of Alabama and the opportunities they've had there. I think back to last year when they lost, and Nick Saban had them stay at the press conference and talk about what great leaders they were and how important they were to him and to the university and to the program. It's just, I feel like it's just different with those two. Like there's a relationship with both of them, with the university and the program and the coach, that you don't see with Nick Saban a whole lot. And so I think it probably means a lot to them to win this game for him and, to secure, more of his legacy, but also, their own, to have control over their final game. I think is important. You do worry about injury, absolutely, but I think you can get hurt training. We see it every draft cycle. Guys get hurt, training for the combine. So I think as an athlete, as a competitor, it's hopefully not something they're thinking about, and they're able to just enjoy one last game.
Is there anybody on the defensive side of the ball, Matt, outside of Anderson, that is a significant draft prospect, maybe a day 1 or day 2 guy?
Yeah, definitely. I think Brian Branch at safety is a day 1 player. He's, a versatile matchup type guy. He's going to play in the slot. He's going to play, on the outside. He's going to play single high safety. And they move him all over the place, which speaks to, his ability for Nick Saban to trust him. Henry To'oTo'o, the middle linebacker, is definitely draftable, probably round 2, maybe round 3. He's a little bit smaller for an inside linebacker. Jordan Battle, another guy that probably could have came out last year, decided to go back to school. He's more of a strong safety. He's absolutely in the mix. And then Eli Ricks, who transferred from LSU, where he was an All-American, was suspended to start the year. He has gotten back in Nick Saban's good graces, and he's playing lights out ball. So the defense is still an Alabama defense. They're still really good. And Dallas Turner, their other pass rusher, is not draft eligible, but will probably be a first-round prospect once he is. They're loaded on defense, and that's, I think, where you have worries as a K-State fan is how do you move the ball on this defense?
Yep. No, I appreciate that. That's great perspective, Matt. I know you got to run soon, so I just wanted to ask you maybe a couple questions on the Big 12. We know it's been well noted over the last couple of years that the Big 12 struggled in the draft, hasn't had many first-round picks. Do you see that changing this year? I know Tyree Wilson, Texas Tech defensive end, Bijan Robinson, some others. What do you view of the Big 12 prospects in this year's draft?
Yeah, it's better. It's certainly better. Bijan Robinson announced on Monday he's declaring for the draft. He will be a first-round pick. You could pretty much write that one in stone. Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech will be a first-round pick. Maybe even they could both go in the top 10, guys, and I wouldn't be surprised. I think they're both just that good a player. Other than that, I think there is – I'm scrolling my list right here. There's a drop-off from there. Siaki Ika from Baylor and Felix there at K-State are probably the next two guys in the mix of – and with Ika, it's so scheme dependent as a nose tackle where he's going to get drafted. But if they were both selected late first round, I don't think it would be a surprise, but probably more round two. But, with Oklahoma being down, with Texas continuing to underachieve, I think that, that you look at the Big 12 and it's more Baylor, it's more Texas Tech, it's more K-State putting players into the NFL now.
What about your thoughts on Duggan? I was just Max Duggan announced he's going pro. I saw you tweeted about it last night, but what do you make of him and his draft prospects?
Yeah, guys. I mean, like I tweeted, you always respect the player's decision because we don't know their circumstances, right? So, if that's what you want to do, that's totally fine. I respect it. I was surprised. I think he's a late round prospect, round 7 to UDFA type player. I mean, he's a hell of a football player. Had a fantastic year. He just doesn't really meet what the NFL wants, in terms of arm threshold. I think passing mechanics, he would have to rework a lot of things to become competent at the pro level. It's not to say he can't do it. I'm excited to see him at the Senior Bowl next month. I saw he accepted an invite there, but I was surprised. I thought he probably could have made a decent amount of money and returning as a Heisman finalist, to have that year, maybe another year to prove yourself as a passer, to further develop your game. I really thought that could have benefited him. That would have been my advice of, hey, they're probably going to make it worth your while to go back to TCU, and then you can continue to develop there. Quentin Johnston, their stud receiver, another player we should have mentioned from the Big 12, is going to get drafted very early. And Kendre Miller, the running back, who could also be one of the top 5 running backs drafted. They're probably both gone. And so you can understand, he might not want to break in a new star receiver and a new running back. But we'll see what happens. It's definitely going to be interesting.
Yep, for sure. Well, Matt, hey, we really appreciate your time. Can you tell K-State fans, for our listeners, how they can find your work, find you on Twitter, find you on ESPN?
Yeah, so ESPN.com, obviously. I usually write 1 to 2 articles a week. Right now, I'm doing a piece on the top 25 players in the college football playoff. So it gives you a little bit of a deep dive. We're starting to get into a lot of player rankings, team needs, mock drafts, and then once January rolls around, you'll unfortunately be able to watch me on TV a couple times a week talking about the draft usually on Get Up, SportsCenter, and NFL Live.
All right. Well, hey, Matt, really appreciate it. So grateful for your time and perspective on this, and glad we could make this work.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you, Matt. We'll go to break, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit K-State basketball and K-State football recruiting signing day coming up here in just a couple days on December 21st, and we'll get Derek's thoughts heading into signing day before our signing day show. So we'll go to break now, and we'll come back to talk a little more K-State. All right, we're back. Derek and I with you. John wasn't able to make it today, but we wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about National Signing Day. We're going to have a signing day show or two later this week that we'll unveil. Really looking forward to that. It's always one of the more exciting times of the year, and obviously, we've got one of the best in the business here in Derek that covers Kansas State and has his fingerprints all over K-State recruiting. And so, Derek, I don't know, it just came off another recruiting weekend. Dead period now has started. So guys that were making visits, phone calls to recruits, et cetera, that's no longer prohibited for the next few weeks. What's the latest when it comes to K-State recruiting?
Yeah, most of it's really centered on the transfer portal at the moment, to be quite honest. And even though there isn't a lot of spots available for some of those transfers, because you got to think about it, some of these seniors are going to come back to Kansas State for a super senior year. It's what it sounded like. And we'll touch on that probably in the future when those choices become a little bit more solidified, because they can still be reversed and there's still a game left. So there's a long way to go there. And I mean, you guys have kind of seen the news at this point too. Not a whole lot of transfer portal entries on the side of Kansas State. And from a conversation that I had on Sunday night, I think there will be, probably more than what's already happened, but they're not expecting a bunch more. This is, I know Cole's touched on it. Sometimes culture can kind of create this kind of stability within a roster that you don't necessarily see across college football. It's pretty rare. But that's the case at Kansas State right now. So a very healthy situation all the way around. So there's not a ton of spots available. Just on the visit weekend itself, and they had Andrew Metzger, the tight end from the Denver area, and he'll choose between Kansas State and Nebraska. Terry Kirksey, a guy that played linebacker for Hutchinson Community College on Wednesday night's junior college national title game. I think he played injured. He got hurt on the third play of the game. It sounded like a groin issue that really limited him the rest of that contest. But I think that one's down to Kansas State, Kansas, and Indiana, just based on the visits that were at play there. You got to like where K-State is positioned. What they just added a transfer in North Dakota State defensive back Marcus Seigel. You would think just because of his experience playing corner in Fargo, much like Josh Hayes. Remember, Josh Hayes played safety at Kansas State, but he was a corner in Fargo as well. So you got to think maybe those two things align, and he plays that type of position at Kansas State. Just trying to think across. They're still looking for a transfer running back. I think they're also waiting and kind of for confirmation on what Deuce Vaughn will decide to do. Obviously, we just touched on that with a little bit of the draft process there. So I think that's going to kind of dictate the direction. But they did offer North Carolina A&T running back, I'll probably butcher his name, Bishal Tutin, I want to say. So I think he's on the radar. They still would like to get a nose guard in the transfer portal, I believe. West Virginia's Jordan Jefferson would make a lot of sense. Now, that is a premium position when it comes to the transfer portal, the nose guard. Anybody that sees a nose guard with the proven production of Jordan Jefferson had in Morgantown, they're probably going to pounce on him. So it wouldn't be shocking to know that he has like 30 Power 5 schools beating down his door. The inroads that K-State would have is that they recruited him out of high school and became second to the Mountaineers. So you would hope maybe that past experience helps on that front. Still waiting the decision of Trey Spivey, a receiver. I think that'll be a signing day choice between Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and Arizona. I like where K-State's at. Asa Newsom, linebacker, high schooler that they basically chased for 3 years, it feels like. I think that's going to come down to Kansas State, Minnesota, and Kentucky. Holding on to commits is kind of a task right now, too. You got programs, poking around. Devin Voss, Jordan Allen, Will Lee, Cameron Salas, Ryan Davis, Joe Jackson. So I think playing defense is as much of playing offense at this point if you're K-State.
Yeah, it certainly adds to the stress of recruiting but it's obviously a good sign, right? That K-State has a lot of guys that are being chased by a lot of major Power 5 programs, and that comes with the territory. You up your recruiting, you're going to get other programs trying to chase them here at the end and try to get some flips. But certainly sounds like K-State's doing a great job of holding on to them. Hopefully there's no negative signing day surprises that we find out about. The only signing day surprises that I like are the surprises that are the fun ones that go in K-State's favor. So hopefully we see maybe one or two of those, but no negative ones of any flips at the last second, because you touched on it, DY. Will Lee played in the JUCO national title game for Iowa Western against Hutch, where Terry Kirksey of Hutch also played, another guy K-State's chasing. But Will Lee, he covered Malik Benson most of that game, who's the #1 junior college player in the country, committed to Alabama, probably Alabama's best wide receiver commit, and a guy that they view as a potential first-round pick down the road. And, from Lansing, Kansas, actually. And William Lee at 6'3", another big corner. We've talked about him on the show before, but he really shut Benson down. So it sounds like that drew the eyes of a lot of Power 5 programs and got their attention.
Yeah, Alabama notably too. I think they're involved on that, or at least tried to become involved on that. Willie's, if you look at his size, just what he's able to do from a skill set standpoint, you would think he would be the ideal replacement, at least at this point, for someone like Julius Brents, where because we're expecting Brents obviously to leave early and not take a super senior year. He's already accepted an invite to the Senior Bowl, which kind of reveals what his intentions are at this point. They got a handful of guys that can really step in and play cornerback right now, just not Will Lee. So it'll be interesting to see that competition in the offseason.
Yeah, certainly like what I saw from Lee and drawing the attention of Alabama. The good news is he didn't take a visit, it sounds like, anywhere, an official visit. So it looks like, based off his Twitter, too, he's pretty locked in on K-State. You mentioned Seigel committing transfer from North Dakota State, and then Thomas Harper, transfer safety from Oklahoma State, was on campus this weekend as well, I believe. And you mentioned Josh Hayes, DY. He's another guy with that versatility that has played corner at Oklahoma State and also played safety. So if you read about Oklahoma State, a lot of their fans will say their defense started to head south when Harper got hurt. He started the first 7 games this year. Then he got banged up, didn't play the rest of the season. And certainly a guy that it sounds like the Cowboys are going to miss. Hopefully K-State can land him. I know that decision is still waiting as well as we're recording this on Monday. So anyone else, DY, that we're missing that we need to hit on from a recruiting standpoint?
Well, I think we already touched on it, but obviously Landon Keegan Johnson's still a big piece of the puzzle that they've already added at wide receiver. That's kind of the position that they had to address, and they already have. Harper, it sounds like, I wouldn't be surprised if that process dips into January a little bit. I think he's going to see schools, it sounds like, just based off of what I've heard. Like I said, a conversation I had Sunday evening leads me to believe that the 2 positions they feel like they definitely need to address, or maybe this is an insight into what Deuce Vaughn will do, or it's just in case, is running back and nose guard. Those are 2 spots that they'd like to have some clarity on in the near future.
Oh. All right. Well, hey, like we mentioned, we'll have a signing day show or 2 potentially. We're trying to see if we can get a guest lined up as well for later this week. National Signing Day is December 21st. That's Wednesday of this week. Not sure if we'll record one for Wednesday or Thursday or both days. We'll see. But it's certainly going to be an exciting time. We'll have Derek on, who's the best in the business to this, to break things down. And if we'll let you know if we have any surprises, and maybe if we do have a surprise or 2, we'll do an extra show for that. So that covers football recruiting. We'll take one more break, and then we'll come back, and we're just going to touch on a little K-State basketball. The Wildcats got a big win over Nebraska on Saturday at T-Mobile Center, downtown Kansas City. So let's talk a little K-State hoops when we come back from break. All right, we're back from break. Derek, K-State beats Nebraska 71-56 on Saturday at T-Mobile Center. I thought it was maybe one of K-State's most complete performances this season. They outside of a 5-minute stretch late in the second half where Nebraska was able to cut it to 9. K-State really dominated the Cornhuskers, and that's a Nebraska team that, is better than their 6-6 record now shows. That, we mentioned they won at Creighton. We know Creighton's scuffling, but Creighton's largely scuffling because Ryan Kalbrenner, the Big East Defensive Player of the Year, has missed 4 games due to sickness, and they came back from Maui and has just really struggled. But that's a talented Creighton team. Nebraska beat them when they were still at full strength. Took Purdue, which I've seen some people think is the best team in America right now, the way they're playing. Took Purdue to overtime in Lincoln just 10 days ago. So Kansas State dominates the Huskers. Great crowd. What were your thoughts on the performance, DY?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way, that was probably one of their best performances start to finish. I think Jerome Tang said the same thing. I think it's also 2 straight games, which gives me a little, I think it's a good thing. 2 straight games where I thought they played with consistent effort and energy from start to finish too. There's been lulls even in all the wins, I think, here and there, just of where it looks like they get a little bit of distracted and almost bored at times, right? I think that can probably come with the schedule that they've completed. So the effort and energy, playing with a little bit more life for a full 40 minutes. I think we've seen that 2 straight games. I'm not sure we've seen that in 2 straight games this year before that. So that, to me, that's a positive sign. I tend to think the same thing. I know people think they look at the name in the front of the jersey and be like, Nebraska sucks. Or they look at their 6-6 record and say, Nebraska sucks. I don't think Kansas State's going to get enough credit for this win. I think you can make an argument that the win over Nebraska is more impressive than the win over LSU. And I think people would probably scoff at that blindly, but especially with just the way that the LSU game unfolded, I think there was probably more mental toughness that was required in that win over the Tigers and the Cayman Islands. But the more impressive win to me was the win over the Huskers, and it's probably not close. You kind of listed off the accolades of Nebraska this year, despite their 6-6 record. I mean, they played a really battle-tested schedule too. I mean, they didn't just beat Creighton. They blew the doors off of Florida State, blew the doors off of Boston College. Quite frankly, they've played, probably a more challenging schedule pretty easily than Kansas State. At least they've had a lot of high major competition. So, with that schedule, if they had Nebraska schedule, is K-State 10-1? Probably not. So that kind of tells you what the Huskers have faced this year as well. And regardless of what Creighton's doing now, you're still being a talented club, and you deserve credit for that. So I think the winner of the Huskers, Kansas State's probably not going to get enough credit for that like they should, and that's unfortunate because it was a really impressive win. You also have to take into account just how different the Huskers are with Derek Walker versus without Derek Walker, and that kind of tells you where they are at in their trajectory as a program, at least under Fred Hoiberg. I think he's beginning to figure it out a little bit as a head coach there in Lincoln, and it wouldn't surprise me if they had I'm not going to say they're an NCAA tournament team. They've never made the NCAA tournament in the program's history, but I imagine they're going to pick up some solid Big Ten wins and at least, give a lot of Big Ten teams fits this year with what they can do. And obviously Derek Walker is a big part of that. And one of the more impressive things Kansas State did is they shut down Derek Walker more than anyone has this year.
Yeah, they held Walker to 1 of 5 shooting. He really wasn't much of a presence at all against Kansas State. And that's a guy that was averaging a near double-double coming into the game. And another thing to call out, and we mentioned it last week on one of the shows, but Walker also missed the season's first 4 or 5 games as well due to injury. So a couple of those losses they had, they didn't have arguably their best player, and now they're at full strength. So that certainly plays a factor. Sam Griesel, he's a solid point guard. He's a 6'7" point guard, and Marquise Noel did a heck of a job guarding him, and K-State rotated different guys on him. But, there was one time where Griesel just tried to back him down, and Noel forced him into a turnover where he just lost the ball out of bounds. So I thought K-State defended really well. They held Nebraska to 33% shooting from the floor, 4 of 21 from 3. I thought it was an all-around really good effort. K-State shot the ball well from the perimeter. Early on, I think they finished 10 of 28 from 3, but yeah, I think they were 7 of 15. After their first 15 attempts, and then they had some misses down the stretch. But yeah, I just thought it was a complete performance, and I thought, obviously Keontae Johnson is a badass. Like, everybody knows that now. The guy is shooting 60% from the floor and over 50% from 3 and averaging 18 points and 7 rebounds a game. Like, he's been there every game. He's been great. He had a double-double against Nebraska, 23 and 11. But I think one of the biggest storylines from that game, DY, and really over the last couple weeks, is the resurgence of Naquan Tomlin really coming on. And Naquan in that game had 15 points, I believe, and 7 rebounds. I think he was 6 of 10 from the floor. Hit a couple of huge threes. Really, he hit a huge three coming out of a timeout after the media timeout where K-State, Nebraska had just cut this thing. They were on a 10-0 run. They'd cut it to 9. And Tomlin, with the shot clock running down, buries a 3 to push K-State back out to a 12-point lead. Naquan now over his last 4 games is averaging 14 points, 7.5 rebounds on 50% shooting and 45% from 3. So I think that's a big factor. Obviously, he's kind of that third guy that K-State needs to be able to become more consistent. And we talked about there's going to be some ups and downs with him, some flashes, but hopefully we're seeing a little more consistency starting to come from him. And I think one of the things that really impressed me the most, DY, was just how physical he played and how tough he played against Nebraska. There were a couple times he got the ball down in the post and really muscled up and got the ball in.
Yeah, he finishing through contact, really shooting from the outside with confidence much earlier in his, development track than I would have anticipated. And just collectively, I think it was just a great sign for me to see this team handle Nebraska the way they did. I mean, largely they were up by 15 to 18 points throughout the contest. And quite honestly, Nebraska is built almost just like the Butler team that had their way with K-State. So just to see I think a giant learning curve and a huge improvement just in that small window of play of games from one game to the other is a bright spot for Kansas State. Because, Butler Manny Bates, Nebraska, Derek Walker, shooters around. It's a very similar team.
Yep, completely agree. And I was at the game. It was a great atmosphere, great crowd. Nebraska had a decent amount of fans there as well, but it was a lot of fun. We took Brody down to the game. My wife and I went, had great seats behind the bench by the tunnel, and just really enjoyed it. Always love those holiday games in Kansas City, especially when you get an opponent that's a high major type opponent on the floor against you as opposition. It was a lot of fun down there, and it was great seeing so many K-Staters make it to the game. Best crowd K-State's played in front of this year, and I think we'll see those crowds continue to increase as Big 12 play starts on New Year's Eve at home against West Virginia. I'll probably be in attendance for that one. I don't think John's going to get me down to the Sugar Bowl successfully, so I'll probably be at that basketball game, hopefully in just a great mood after K-State beats Alabama on New Year's Eve. That would be delightful, although I don't feel quite as optimistic about it now as Bryce Young and Will Anderson made the surprising decision to play. That, not saying K-State cannot win the game.
Yeah, that'll be obviously the challenge is increased by that change of fate where what we were probably not anticipating. And later that night, West Virginia's top 10 in the net right now.
Yeah. That's going to be a huge game because Texas and Baylor on the road back-to-back right after that game. And you mentioned it, West Virginia is number nine in the net. They're the second highest ranked Big 12 team in the net. That's going to be K-State's probably first opportunity for a quad one win. They don't have a quad one win. Now, K-State's 37th in the net right now, which is great. I think anybody would have been surprised with that coming into this, but that can obviously fluctuate still early in the year. And so you really need to start to stack up some quad one wins because that's going to be the big knock on Selection Sunday if you don't have more than 5 quad ones.
Yeah, you need to get to about 6 or 7, especially with K-State's strength of schedule, which I think is close to 100 or over it. They might need an extra one that and maybe another team might not need that they're probably up against if they are on the bubble. Hopefully they don't have to worry about being on the bubble, of course. But those things will matter. West Virginia they play great, good basketball, but 3 best wins for Kansas State are LSU, Nebraska, Nevada. None of them are quad one. LSU's probably not going to be a quad one despite being 10-1 unless they really have a good start to the SEC play, knock off some considerable teams. They're going to have plenty of opportunity as well. To be honest, though, they play Alabama, they play Arkansas, they play Kentucky, so Tennessee. That's a tougher league than it has been in the past. And the SEC's kind of turned it around from a basketball standpoint. LSU will have a lot of chances. You're going to have to be LSU's biggest fan probably moving forward. Nevada's lingering right there at number 55. So it'll be interesting to see what they do net-wise from here on out, because that's probably the closest to a quad one win that Kansas State has right now.
Yeah, and if anyone's not familiar, the quad metrics, quad one is on your home floor 1 through 30 in the net rankings, neutral floor 1 through 50. So Nevada sitting at 55 is just outside that. Now they're in the Mountain West Conference, which has been more respectable. San Diego State obviously has been a great program out there, as well as some other programs. So root for Nevada, root for LSU. Florida right now is 51 in the net. K-State's going to play them on January 28th as part of the SEC Big 12 Challenge. Florida could get in there as well. It's at home, though, yeah. So you need Florida to get in the top 30, so they're going to have to go on a surge through SEC play. And, we mentioned K-State would just not a quad one win yet, but just like DY was saying, K-State's going to have plenty of opportunities in Big 12 play. That's kind of the benefit and the negative at the same time of playing in this conference, because it's the best conference in America. It's so hard. It's a grind to get through, but you also have a lot of chances to stack quality wins. So K-State's going to have plenty of opportunities to do so. They've certainly done, I think, what anyone could have hoped for in the non-con to get to 10-1, assuming they take care of Radford. Go ahead, DY.
In terms of those quad one opportunities, they are still going to be there this year. They definitely are. I'm not saying it won't, because just the way the rankings come out, that's going to be what it is. I will say this: I'll be a little bit of a devil's advocate. It won't matter when it comes to strength of schedule and quad one wins, because those are still going to be present based on what we're seeing for the net already. But I don't know if anyone's really coming out and said this yet, but I think the Big 12 is down this year compared to last year. I really do. Now, I think TCU is starting to pick it up, but I think Oklahoma might be worse. I think Oklahoma State might be worse. I think Texas Tech is certainly worse. Now, Kansas State is better, but just from what Kansas State faced in the Big 12 last year versus this year, I do think that the Big 12 is weaker this year than it was last season. Not saying Big 12 isn't good, it still is, but I think Baylor is also weaker than they were last year as well. So, and I know they won the national championship, but I actually think this year's Kansas team is going to end up better than last year's.
Yeah, it's interesting because you look at it. You're right. Texas Tech has taken a downturn. I mean, they're nowhere near what they've been the last few years. Now they're going to get. It sounds like I'll butcher his name. Fardaz
Amac. They're going to get him back, but I don't know if that's a good thing at this point.
Yeah, no, it sounds like there's maybe some culture issues within that Tech program. Things maybe falling apart a little bit. And when you watch them play, I mean, Texas Tech has snuck past Nicholls State and Eastern Washington each of their previous 2 games on their home floor, where they were losing at various points in the second half of those games. So Tech is not the same team. TCU looks like they're picking things back up now that they're fully healthy, but they're still down. And I think they're going to figure it out. They'll be all right. But what's interesting, you got West Virginia this year. Go ahead.
I was going to say, to go against what I just said, 2 teams that are certainly that K-State will play that is certainly better than they were last year. West Virginia. Actually, I was going to say Texas, but now there's a lot of uncertainty there.
Well, that's the thing. Texas looked like they were going to be arguably the best team in the Big 12. They've got a ton of talent, and it looked like it was coming together. Now, a major distraction that certainly impacted their game against Rice that they had to go to overtime with after the Chris Beard stuff. And then they did beat Stanford by 10 yesterday. Stanford's not good, but we'll see if Texas rebounds. K-State could be catching Texas at a good time in early January. Now, they'll have some time to recalibrate before then, but that's a major hurdle and distraction for their players to get through. And you're right, West Virginia is a team that was at the bottom of the conference this last year, and now they've really surged up with some additions they've made to the roster. So they've kind of replaced some of that, but I do think Baylor is down a little bit. They're still a very good team, but when you watch Baylor, it's not quite the same. And I think Thamba Thachua being out has hurt them. They don't have much in the post. Thamba is just a defensive guy, really, and they don't have much that's scoring in the post.
Their issue has been defense. So the Baylor is probably worse. Texas has a huge distraction. Texas Tech is worse. TCU has started out worse, but I think they're going to figure it out like you. I think Oklahoma is just what they were last year, maybe even a little worse. So they haven't really impressed me yet. Oklahoma State, I don't think that's a tournament team right now. Maybe they are. Maybe they figure it out too. But that's not a team that scares me if I'm Kansas State. West Virginia is better. Believe it or not, KU, they have a chance to be better. As irritating as that may sound too, right? And then Iowa State's really a team I don't know how to describe at this point. They just play a very unorthodox way, or TJ Otzelberger that I think doesn't look good, but then you go look at their metrics and their record and who they've beaten. It's like, oh, maybe they are good. I mean, they've beaten 2 teams. I think they beat both Villanova and North Carolina. I think 2 teams that may not be as good as people thought they would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think Iowa State is a very similar team to what they really were last year. Like I just kind of, they're going to have some games where it's very ugly for them, like the Iowa game that already happened this year, where they went to Iowa and Iowa didn't even have its best player and they got the doors blown off of them. And you're right. I mean, they beat a Villanova team that's been a disaster under their first year head coach with Jay Wright gone. And then North Carolina had been a disaster. They're just now getting back on track, it looks like. Yeah. But Iowa State got them early. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, it looks like Iowa State's – yeah, go ahead.
North Carolina maybe starting to figure it out. Iowa State, that win's going to look better than maybe it was at the time. Just some of the stuff with the net, it's like if you get a team at the right time and then they take off later, you just kind of get lucky just because of that. And Iowa State will probably be the recipient of that when it comes to North Carolina. But I guess, taking everything into account, where I think Iowa State, Oklahoma State are what we thought they'd be, maybe lesser. I don't know. KU's pretty good. West Virginia's a lot better. Texas, big distraction. Tech and Baylor have dropped off. All I would say is that it's still a tough league, and you're going to have to bring it every night if you want to win. Not saying that, but at the same time, what I thought was going to be a completely tough journey for Kansas State, one that might not be doable, I think their path is probably a little bit clearer than I thought it would be before the season.
Yeah, no, this certainly can be an NCAA tournament team, which is what we all said in the offseason, especially after they added Keontae Johnson. This is a team that can get to the tournament. I think you and I are in agreement that they just need a little more from the bench outside of Desi Sills. And I don't know, Bebe getting back healthy, if he can help them, if they can get Ish Masood, Jerome Tang kind of called him out after the Nebraska game in his post-game press conference. He didn't play. I know he'd also been banged up, missed a couple of games before that. Then it played a few minutes, I think against Incarnate Word. But, they certainly seem a little bit frustrated that with Masood right now, he's an upperclassman and they're trying to maybe get him to get going because they could certainly use a little bit of a scoring punch off the bench outside of Sills.
Yeah, I wonder. We'll see if Ish or Finister are going to be consistently able to do anything. But I imagine, at least for the foreseeable future, it feels like that bench is going to be Desi, Bebe. It almost sounds like he's going to be able to go against Radford on Wednesday just before Christmas break. And then the other guy would be Tyke Green. And, he's getting consistent minutes because his effort level doesn't really fade. And you appreciate that, but he has to do more with the minutes that he's getting.
Yeah, Tyke's a guy that started off well early on, but it's been a bit of a struggle for the last few weeks for him. And maybe just trying to find his role in the system. Hopefully he can figure it out because he's a guy that averaged 14 and 8 at Stony Brook the year before, has been a guy that's been able to score in his career. And hopefully he can get K-State 6 to 7 points a game. Right now he's averaging around 4. You just like to see things pick up a little bit for him. So that's a Big 12 basketball talk. We're going to have plenty more content about K-State basketball, especially as the season gets going in Big 12 play and football season winds down. But wanted to talk a little bit more about K-State hoops with all of you. And then, maybe before the West Virginia game, we'll have some sort of preview show. We'll see how crazy it is. DY, John, I think, is going to be in New Orleans as well. But we'll see what we can string together for some basketball coverage heading into the New Year's. And appreciate it, DY, as always, jumping on. Appreciate Matt Miller for jumping on with us and giving his valuable time to talk K-State draft prospects. Hope you all enjoyed that. He's a great guest and does great work at ESPN. Also want to again thank our sponsors, Holiday Distillery, 360 Vodka. If you're going to have some Bloody Marys, maybe at the 11 a.m. kick for the Sugar Bowl, make sure you get some 360 Vodka. And then maybe in the evening hours of New Year's Eve, have some Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon or 360 Vodka, if that's your taste, for your New Year's Eve celebration. So, Derek, anything else that you had to add? I think we covered it all, right?
Oh yeah, we did about a little bit of everything. So
yeah, it was kind of a buffet of different topics here for you K-State fans. But we'll have a signing day episode, like I said, hopefully 2 this week. So there's a lot of exciting K-State content coming your way. Sugar Bowl preview, deep dive, like we always do, will be coming your way within the next 7 to 8 days as well. So thanks again for listening. We appreciate all of you for your support. Thanks for listening to another 3 Mile Pod.